a special child, basically it means children with special needs. And by children with special needs, I mean children that have an additional need either due to a physical health condition, you know, children that might have been born with congenital syndromes, they've been born with cerebral palsy, or children that are diagnosed later in life with some social communication difficulties like autism, Asperger's, learning difficulties, or even the non-visible disabilities. And also, you do have the class of children that are undiagnosed, but they still need that support. The common thing about what special children is that they have these additional needs that impacts their ability to learn and develop. And the main thing about them is making sure they have the opportunity to get that support, that need, you know, that extra support that they need in order to flourish and thrive to be the best they could be. Because if a child has uh, any special or additional needs or any diagnosis, it doesn't fit them into a particular box. It doesn't make them that they can't do or cannot achieve or cannot be resilient. Giving them that support is what gives them the opportunity to thrive in society, because no one can live in a bubble. um, I personally, I do not like the term special needs. I always use additional needs, exceptional children. So, during this course of this discussion, I'll probably refer to it mostly saying additional needs at most of the times. And another thing to mention, because sometimes we always think it's all about the diagnosis, but it's also involves children with long-term health conditions. So it could also be children that have been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis or cancer because they are having some treatment or something that is going to always impact on their learning. They are not going through the normal straightforward process in schooling. And again, like I said, it's just making sure that they have that additional need or support and support to enable them thrive. Now, it's very important, like I said, with regards to the non-visible disabilities, there are also children that have issues with dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. Those, it could also impact on their learning. And it's things that if it's not recognized, if they don't have that support, that have that effect on their future, because then the child might feel withdraw into themselves, thinking that they are not able to achieve, but it's just about giving them that support. Main emphasis on support. Now, one of the things I'm hoping from today is that my three main goals is that I'm able to give a better understanding about families and children with special needs or additional needs. I'm able to highlight some places or resources to get some support, and hopefully I should be able to impact some skills or some ideas that with the that are helpful when dealing with a child with additional needs as well. Now, just before we go further, if I might need your help here, is there anybody present that is a parent of a child with additional need today? I can't see the chat box, so I wouldn't be able to know. If you're on mute.
So anyone who has that can just pop it on the chat box. I'll have a look at it. I go close the chat box. So I don't have any comments yet.
Okay. Fair enough. What I was asking is just basically because as parents, we do not expect to have a child with additional needs. It's something that can happen unexpected. It's not something you plan for. And I guess one of the questions I was going to ask is if you would consider yourself a parent or a carer. But since we don't have any other parents there, from my personal experience, it took me a while to come to this conclusion, to understand that you actually have to fulfill both roles. You're always going to be a parent to your child, but you also have to recognize that you are a carer as well, because being a parent, you have the parental responsibility. You have to take care of the child. You have to, you have you have that responsibility to help bring that child into a fulfilling member of society. However, but the other part of it is that being a carer is anyone who looks after a family member or a friend or someone that has any um, disability that can affect them, without which they cannot function. So that means you're needing to do that additional care for your child. Now, we all care for our children, but you are still a carer, because there are some things that you might do that other moms who do not have children with additional needs wouldn't do in the morning. There are some things they would consider first in the morning, or first for a routine, that other moms with children without additional needs wouldn't do in the morning. So again, it's getting that mindset that you are going to be in both roles, because when you accept or know that you are in both roles, it also equips you in a position to be able to understand yourself, and also know that you have to take care of yourself on both sides in order to access what help or what kind of resources that are helpful to you. Because as a parent, sometimes you can feel like you need to do it all, but then you still need to consider yourself as a carer, because as a carer you also are taking care of that person, and you also need to be aware of what resources or what funding is available to you, or where you can get help, because being a parent and a carer can be isolating, but you do need to have that extra support. Now, as parents of children with additional needs, there's a lot of challenges that you do face along the way. And just sharing from my own personal experience, and from experience of other people, one of the main things is that you as a parent, you understand you have to advocate extra hard. You have to advocate and stand for your child extra hard, because you're their voice. Because with children with additional needs, they do not all fit in one box. Their needs would vary. What one child needs is not what the other child needs. The level of support that they would need would always differ, and this is always changing, because a child will grow. So what they might have needed as a child, as a baby, would not be the same kind of level of support that they would need as a child going into primary school. And again, going back to the challenges, one of the first things I would say about it is just the acceptance. And acceptance, basically, it goes on two parts. Acceptance on the parents' part, saying, getting that initial talk or review that the child needs investigations. Now, I'm a Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. And prior to coming here, I hadn't had much experience with children with additional needs. And from the beginning, initially, at the beginning of that initial assessment of my child, I felt it was labeling, because I felt, oh no, they want to package him or fit him in a box. But again, it's not about that. It's about understanding what the need of the child is in order to access the support that they need and they require. So that's why I say acceptance it's the acceptance on the parents' part that, yes, my child actually needs an assessment and he would need support. And then there's also acceptance on the part of the healthcare professional or the teacher or anybody that is supporting, in the sense that them recognizing that, okay, this is a child that also needs some additional support. Because you do have parents that would notice things about their children, and sometimes getting someone to be able to get that ball rolling for that assessment can be difficult. Because, and I understand, because as a GP, sometimes you do meet parents and you do want to say, okay, this is something that can happen with the child at this age. These are changes that, it's part of being a normal child. But then again, it's being able to discern, and also being able to listen, getting that person to listen, to understand your concerns, so that the child can have the necessary assessment for them. And then the other part about it is with the diagnosis, because even when a child is given a diagnosis, again, like with everything and with every other condition, you will go through a process. It's like a grief process, a cycle. There's the anger, there's the questioning. You blame yourself about what could have been done and what's not done, what's not been done, and it can affect. It affects families in a very broad way, which I'll talk about as well. And being a parent with children with additional needs, it can affect your goals, your dreams, because um, being a parent of is hard on its own. It's hard. And when there's a child with additional needs, depending on what they need, you might need to adjust your goals. Maybe before you could work full time, and then you realize you cannot work that full time because you need to be flexible for hospital appointments. You need to be accessible in times of emergencies, or you even something as basic as childcare, because the childcare can vary with children with additional needs. I know from my personal experience that even when my child was in nursery or daycare, I still had to pay extra for him to have that one-to-one support because he needed that extra support. So there's also the financial implications and the burdens. And as an immigrant to this country, that has a big factor, because if you are on a work permit visa, you don't have any access to any of the public funds. So you don't have access to things like disability living allowance. You don't get much support. Again, that's another financial restrictions. And on a work permit, you have to work because you have to fulfill the criteria for your work permit again. So again, it's a balancing act. And being a parent of a child with additional needs can be isolating. You want to live in a bubble. You get that feeling that you don't want to take the child out in public because you're worried about what individuals think about your parenting skills, because they're experiencing you deal with a meltdown or you can have actually individuals that would talk back at you about what your child is doing or what your child looks like, or even just staring rudely at anything going on. And at that point, it's difficult because you have to choose which battle you want to fight. Are you going to tell everybody, oh no, he's this is his diagnosis, oh no, he's that? You have to choose which battles you want to fight. What you have to place yourself and protect yourself and your child, because as much as you want to stay in that bubble, you still have to enable them go out so that they can thrive. You want to enable them understand the workings of the outer society, because they are not going to be in the house forever. They are not going to be that baby you can push in a pram and close it up and hide away forever. They need to be able to integrate it for their own protection. And then also it affects also family life in terms of, if you have a child with additional needs, depending on the level, you can decide, do you want more children? Do you feel the parent guilt is multiplied times 10? Normally, when you have siblings, you have two children, you're already trying not to have a favorite between the two children, and then you have a child that has additional needs, so you have to make that conscious effort not to neglect the other child so that they don't feel left out. Let them have their own identity, their own life. And then the impact on the relationship, it's something that can be a big impact. Again, I'm Nigerian. Let's not even go to the family dynamics and when they talk about the village and what's happening and everything else coming from. So again, it has a big impact on the family dynamics. And even then, it has an impact on your friends. And finally, just the other challenge is that even with children with additional needs, they still need some form of discipline and modeling of their behavior. And with other children, when you're trying to parent children, people say, oh no, you just need to be firm with them and they would understand. No, it doesn't work like that. With each children with additional needs, it differs because it can be a variety of diagnoses. Their understanding would be different. Everything about them is different, and you have to get to know the child to find what works for you. You have to be able to vary your strategies in dealing with those crises, those catastrophic meltdowns. I mean, I've had episodes where I've walked out on the street with my wig in my child's hand, and you just ignore and you just move and focus, because at that point you just have to get that child to a safe place in order for him to calm down. So there are lots of challenges, and we've not even talked about what I would say a postcode lottery. Having a child with additional needs, it makes you reevaluate where you stay, because then you're thinking about the schooling, what's accessible in your local council as well. Do you have access to the support groups that you need? So again, it has all these challenges that come up and all these different barriers that affects the life and the family life as a whole. And just going on with the modeling and tackling children's behaviors, just a quick stop, basically just dealing with meltdowns. When I mentioned about skills with about dealing with children with additional needs, like I said, each child is different, but I just made a quick summary of things that can help when you're dealing with that crisis meltdown, that episode that keeps going on for like an hour or almost 30 minutes to an hour, and you're thinking, how would it stop? Sometimes it's recognizing what's going to trigger the child. It's letting the child be themselves, being patient, trying to be distract them using your sensory toys, your giggle sticks, hugging them, being able to communicate with them, or even getting them to communicate back to you using their flashcards or anything, or emotion cards, because basically part of it is the fact that they are not able to actually communicate their feeling, or even just taking them out of that area where they might be oversensitized because of the exposure to all the others, overstimulation of their sensory parts. So it's a few different things, like just main thing being that just being patient and recognizing the triggers and ensuring the child is just in a safe place. Sometimes it might be just waiting that actual process out, and when they're ready, they will calm down and come back to you. One thing I found with my child is that trying to use the timeout or naughty stick or naughty place, no, no, doesn't work. Doesn't work. Wouldn't respond to that. And yeah, we were very quick to try and we were very quick to drop it and come up with other innovative things, looking at his interests. So even something that we know that it's not actually a reward to us, like, oh, if you do, for example, if you do this, then I'll play football with you. We're doing an activity, but because he knows that that's what he wants, that's another thing that would just help to calm the situation or help deal with the crisis situation. And for anybody or anyone that has friends or family, or if anybody that has children with additional needs, I think the best way I've found, or the best way I think you cope with things, is building your tribe, building your village, having your support system. One of the first things I've said is family support. Obviously, with being close to family is important. And by being close to family, I mean family that would be able to help, family that have an interest, family that are willing to understand, ask questions, and not just ignore or pretend that nothing is going on in the background. And if you do have a family member that has a child with additional needs, don't be scared to ask the question, or actually inquire, ask how are they doing. Sometimes they might just need that opportunity to be able to talk and speak about what's going on. The challenges that you might face is not the same as the challenges they would face. And then for the parents with additional of children with additional needs, is finding help in other different forms. It might be in the form of outsourcing cleaning or cooking if you could afford it. It might be actually being able to let go, because as a parent with a child with additional needs, you tend to be very overprotective. You want to keep that child in that bubble, but sometimes you have to understand, find that person that you can trust to let go, to in order to give you that downtime to be able to recuperate yourself. Because you're being a parent, you might be a parent, you will be a partner, you will be working, and also you're a carer. So you're already wearing multiple hats. That's before you put on your hat of being a cook, a cleaner, a teacher, and the main advocate or the main fighter for everything. And then the other thing as well is just choosing the schools and liaising the schools with the schools. Having a child with additional need doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be in special school. Again, like I said, it depends on the need of the child. For some children, it is a clear cut that they have to go into the special needs school. But for some children, they will also thrive in a mainstream school. And it's being able to stand and firm and also challenge the school, because but by law, by the Children's Act, the school is actually needs to make reasonable adjustments to accommodate the child. Now, some schools might be difficult. My personal experience, it was like fighting tooth and nail to get something done. And at some point, I literally had to ask the council, like, why can't he have this EHCP, or by EHCP is an Education for Healthcare plan, which is something that you need to have in place in a mainstream school in order for them to be able to access some support from the local council or any other support that would help with the child's education. I mean, there are different people that can help in the schools, and I know for me personally, that's the language autism and social communication service, they were very helpful. The independent advice support service, they were helpful. And also getting that ally in the school, a teacher that listens, because in my experience, I had one teacher that just totally wrote off my son, and then there was another teacher that actually took the time to get to know him, and he is thriving. The other thing is knowing what you want, because even with the school, you have to think about the accessibility. Is it something close to home? Is it something close to a holiday club? Is it something close to where you can get a child minder to pick your child up? So it all varies. You have to take all of that into consideration. There's also the local authority, that's your local council. You can get some more, find out about the local support group depending on the needs of the child. And also accessing flexible working. Now with this, as long as you're an employer and you've been working with the employer in your contract for 26 weeks, because having a child with special additional needs doesn't just happen once at the child's birth or later on. It can happen at any time. Life happens. And if it happens, you have the opportunity to actually access flexible working hours. As long as you've been working for your employers for 26 weeks, you have a right to put that in writing, where you state the date, what you want to do, and also for your employers to be able to reply back with regards to that as well. And just finally, because I know we're fast spent in time now, um, for anybody that has children with additional needs, I would always start by saying, look after yourself, because you can't give what you don't have. If you don't give you anything to yourself, if you don't have that little time to be able to look after yourself, you can't put yourself best forward for this little one or adult you want to protect. Look after your relationship, because again, like I said, it has the effect, it affects the family dynamics, it affects the relationship with your partner and your children. So again, it's something you have to get the fine balancing act on managing your relationships. Try to focus on the positives, not the deficits, because these children were children first before anything was said, before any diagnosis, before they needed anything in addition. And try to develop interests different from the child in order to, so that you can have separate interests and they can thrive in what they are good at. The fact that you might be academically great does not mean that they might be, but they might be excellent in sports and you're not. So try to vary the activities and find the genius in your child. Every child is different. Every child has their own blessing. Every child has something that they are good at. And it's okay if your family functions different from the other. Nobody's a cookie cutter family anyways. So hopefully, I hope I've been able to achieve my goals of giving an idea of what happens with families and children with additional needs. I hope I've been able to point some resources, and hopefully I've given you some tips or skills on how to help individuals that you come across with this. And on the final slide is just some resources that might be helpful to anyone who needs them. Thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Dr. Momoh. It's really helpful. Can you finally just go back to the last slide, the very last slide, the one you just, not the one with the resources, before you come back to it, just the one, the one before this one.
Sorry, I'm trying to go back myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, just looking at this alone, just highlights. Does anyone have any questions? First and foremost, please feel free to tap on the comment section. A couple of people had reached out to me for this, but I can't see any of them on the participant list today. But the good news is that this is going to be recorded, and I'll share it via YouTube, the YouTube link. The very last thing you said, it just resonates, isn't it? Look after yourself and look after your relationships. And that just does it for me. Focus on the positives and not the deficits. And the third one you said was find the genius in your child. I mean, it's interesting to know that some of the children with additional needs to go on to become quite geeky scientists. They all have their special need. They all have their special talents. And I think where it gets challenging for the parents is trying to discover the talent that child has. So then there's a little extra work in trying to figure out what I can do to help this child thrive. But I think the positive is to know that every child that has additional needs can still do very well and still become someone that is great. Richard Branson was, I think he was he dyslexic or dyspraxic? And he's the owner of Virgin Airways. A lot of kids that I have, some people I know with additional needs, like my friend's son, my precious boy, he's very good with numbers and very good with computer. At a very little age, we can spot how smart he is. A little geeky young man, love him so much, but you can see that special talent. And that's what myself and the mom are basically focusing on, just to make sure that we're able to harness that computer little whiskey in him. So does anyone have any questions or any comments about the presentation we've just done? Otherwise, we can leave it till the end and then just go on to Pam to have a chat with us. Any comments on anybody who's, any questions? Or anyone who wants to share their experiences from maybe their friends, their family who has additional needs?
Hello?
Hello, hello.
Hi. Hey, sorry, I joined in a bit late and I'm on the train, so it might cut off. I just want to ask a question if someone can help. Recently, my son, he's in the spectrum, but we haven't done a proper diagnosis yet. But he's in the spectrum and he has help in school. But the one thing I want to find out is, because I noticed that he struggles with classes, being inside the class, even though he doesn't have any problems with the classwork, but he struggles with settling down in class, and sometimes he's just doesn't want to join in, or he's trying to get the teacher's attention, and it's becoming quite a problem for me. And even though he has help in school, it seems like he doesn't even want the help either. So I wanted to find out if someone could actually advise me on what to do, because sometimes the school come off as maybe he's disrupting the class and they don't want him to be in class with them. So if anybody can give me an advice on how to advise the school or tell the school so that we can have him included in classwork, even included in class, even though, or find something he can do that can still, help him so he doesn't feel excluded, because I think he's aware of his situation. He's aware that he's different. And he doesn't like being discussed about, and which is another problem. He doesn't like to be discussed about, and when that starts, he gets worse. This is okay. Yes, it gets worse. But I'm trying to get the school to understand that he's aware of these things and he's not stupid, because sometimes they try to make you feel that way. But is there anything I can tell them so that I can actually have him included in classwork in school, or try to help the teacher understand? Because I'm really struggling with getting empathy from the teacher, basically.
Okay. Sandra,
Yeah.
how old is your son?
He's 5.
He's 5. Okay, so
yes.
So he will be in reception, is that right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, yes, he's in reception kind of.
Okay. Right. So when you said he's on the spectrum, I think my first question was going to be that has there been any referral for an assessment or anything?
Yes, he had he's seen a psychologist. We haven't done a proper assessment, but he's seen a psychologist, a couple, and with the analysis they did on him, he turned out mild. So he's struggling with his speech, but doesn't mean he doesn't understand. But he speaks, he's doing well now. So he's kind of doing he's doing a couple of sentences now back to back. So which really helps. Okay. He's you could see, I think the issue is he's struggling with expressing himself at a certain situation. So in a situation where I think the good thing is that his helper is really good. Mm-hmm. So in a situation where maybe the teacher is trying to call people in class or to answer a question, and he doesn't have patience to wait, and then he answers the question, and then the teacher, rather than acknowledging that he got the answer and saying, oh, okay, so but you have to learn how to wait, the teacher kind of loses it. Like, you're supposed to be okay to wait, it's not your turn, another person's turn. So I'm trying to tell the teacher that, look, you have to recognize whether he's annoyed you over the years or not. You have to recognize that he doesn't understand. He's struggling with patience, but at least acknowledge the fact that he tried to answer, because he didn't used to answer questions, but now he does it. He's able to answer questions when asked in class, and which is something that everybody's been is kind of surprised about. But he doesn't even get the acknowledgement. He gets more of a keep quiet. And then at that point in time, he loses it. But because he respects the teacher so much and seeing that every other kid wants the teacher's attention, he kind of throws that anger on his AVS, on his, his support person. I'll use that word. And then the school is making it look like the support person doesn't have a hang on Kate on him. So because of it, they don't want him to be in class. So I was wondering, is there any, because I'm trying to sound nice to the teacher, but I'm actually losing my patience a bit. So is there anything is there any word that I can give her or tell the teacher? Because I don't have this instance, I can't use these instances, but is there anything anyone can tell me to try and get the school to understand this is the situation and they have to just find a way to include him, even if it means, I don't know, separating him from other kids. I don't know what else to do because I think I'm losing it now.
Okay, can I just, so my presentation is probably going to address some of your questions, but just to answer your question specifically, I would say the first thing that you need to do is to contact your local authority, your child's advocate. And if it turns out that that school is not meeting the needs of your child, then you need to look at having the child move to a different school.
Okay.
If your child's in a mainstream school, then a lot of the time you'll find that children that have additional needs or special needs, for the better use of term, it takes a lot of, I don't know, again, if there's a SENCO, a SENCO will be a special educational needs coordinator within the school. That again is a point of call that your child needs to be referred to. If there isn't a SENCO within the school, again, that's an issue. So it's difficult if there isn't an actual diagnosis, because then what you would need to do is to get an EHCP, because that then provides your child with the actual support that they need, and the school would need to adhere to the plan. So the HCP would draw on all the everything. Obviously, there'll be an assessment, a full assessment from all authorities that will be working with your child. So the local authority, from health, and from education as well. So obviously, every support your child needs in school. So if your child requires one-to-one support, then that needs to be provided, but that will all be outlined within the plan. So if you feel, because I don't really feel that there's anything you can say particularly to that teacher, it just appears to me like they've made their mind up. And if the child, I mean, he's 5, so he's still at a very, he sounds to me like a very resilient young man. And, you know, you need to be harnessing a lot of what he's doing right now. You don't want to lose that. So I would say, contact your local authority and explain the situation and see maybe if he might be eligible to be assessed for the HCP, because I think that would be my advice. Because if the school's not meeting his needs, you know, because it might be one teacher, but then it might be, that is what, you know, that is probably the culture within that school. So that might be a problem in itself. So he may need to go to a school that actually they are willing to support and to promote his needs and meet his needs there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
CY, do you have any comments to that? Obviously, Pam has spoken from being out there in the community, from the medical side of things. Do you have any comment, anything you wanted to add? Because literally what Pam said is what I know, because I work in an area with lots of safeguarding and lots of, you know, autism, ADHD, proper borderline anxiety diagnosis. So, you know, it's trying to, you know, get the support from the school and start to prepare the report and the EHCP. Any other thing else, you know, you wanted to add?
That was the main thing, basically. Apart from Pam already said local authorities, I was going to say IAS, that's the Independent Advisory Service Board. They were helpful to me. So that's the other person. The other thing, basically, because even then, the other thing basically is, for me, it sounds like what I went through, and I challenged the headmistress. I went straight to the headmistress and I made them start up an individual education plan before the EHCP came into place. I made them start it, and I made them try and create a safe zone for him in his class. Because, you know, for me, the only reason I did that for my child is because my child was in this. The school I picked for him was a school that all the kids that were in his nursery and daycare went to. It was a small school. It was his social comfort zone. So he was fine with the kids, but I needed the teachers to get on board. Now, I'm really sorry you're going through that, Sandra. And some teachers, they just make up their mind, especially if you have a headmistress, that some of them, no offense, if there's any teachers here, some of them just want to get the children out. That's my experience. And if that's the case, then it might be that you need to, like Pam said, you have to look for another school. But again, if he's already being assessed, then he should also have the SENCO involved. You should be having meetings with the SENCO. You should be having what did I have? Was it a pastoral mentor? I had that with my child, that I had to sit down with somebody every 2 weeks to see how he was getting on in school, to make sure that he wasn't having any meltdown, to make sure that they were going on with his education. That was even before the EHCP. But anyways, that was after I went to the office to raise dust. So
right, sorry, I think the reason why it seems like I haven't done those things, because we're currently in France, and we're coming back home soon. So in France it's kind of different, and then again, the school he's in has actually expressed that they kind of support kids in the spectrum. So it was a new plan that started off, and then they have someone in school, a coordinator that manages kids with special needs. But the problem is that sometimes, because the teachers don't want to, they're kind of impatient, and then they kind of pick up they don't see things, in his case, they don't see him as somebody, they don't see it as a child that made a mistake. They see it as, oh, he's in the spectrum and he's causing a lot of problems and he's not listening to me. And then they carry every single problem and throw at the support person, the coordinator. And this coordinator then doesn't know how to, doesn't know how to speak to the teacher or try to educate the teacher in such a situation. So then it's now, she's now in a position where she then comes back to the parents with the teacher's complaints, you know, and it's almost like, I think the last meeting I had with them, which is last week, they were like, my son has a one-to-one, and they were like, oh, that probably he would need to go back, he needs to bonding time with his one-to-one at home, you know, for a few weeks before they come back to school. And I was like, you know what, look, this is not going to happen. It's impossible. My son associates his one-to-one with the school. He doesn't associate the one-to-one with his house. So it's not going to be, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to work. And I've paid for the one-to-one and I'm paying for the school. So I don't understand why the one-to-one should be in the house and not in school. So if the school is going to provide a place, an additional place where they can go when he has meltdowns, then fine. If you're going to provide activities he's going to do outside the class in the meantime or during his break time, then fine. But I am not going to allow this to happen. And this was because the teacher didn't want him in class. So even when I went to pick him up on Friday, I could see that the teacher had already given up and she was like, you know, you couldn't even see the empathy on her face. So she was almost like, you know, take your kid and go home sort of thing. But I don't really care. It's their business. But as long as she doesn't touch my kid. But it's just that my child likes his teacher and he always wants to impress her. So even with all the meltdowns and everything, he comes home and he says, Mrs. Neves is unhappy. Mrs. Neves is sad because Kato threw a tantrum. So he knows what he did, and he knows that he did wrong, and he's trying to get the teacher's attention. He's trying to apologize because he goes back to apologize to the teacher whenever he has a meltdown, and he's 5. So I was like, why can't you just look at him as a 5-year-old kid for once, and rather than look at him as somebody that has special needs? If you look at him as a 5-year-old, it will be easy. It will be easier because kids have meltdowns, you know. But yeah, it's well, I'm saying it now because I can voice out. I haven't been angry, but I just felt like I had to say that. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing.
Actually, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, it just tells the differences in culture, isn't it? Pam and CY, it tells us the differences in culture in different countries and England. I think teachers in England are generally more aware of these things, and it just make you wonder, you know, what happens. I mean, this is France. What's happening in Africa? What's happening in Asia? What are they doing to parents there? Are they just, you know, kicking them away and throwing them away and saying, don't bring your child to school? It just sort of tells you how much of a long way we have to go in terms of, you know, supporting, you know, this sort of children with you know, additional needs. I guess, I mean, Sandra, it's very difficult, I would say, because not being in England is slightly different. Because if you were in England, I would have told you to write a complaint, because that works. Apparently it does. You know, speak to the head teacher, you know.
Yeah.
You might write a formal complaint and say you don't feel your child is being supported by the teacher in class. You don't feel they are pulling their weight in considering the fact that you pay private school, and also you also pay an additional one-to-one. So it's all just left for the teacher to just sort of do little bits and you don't feel supported. Well, I'm not sure how much that weight is going to pull where you are in France. Does that make sense? But ideally that will be, I mean, local authorities writing to them like CY said, had to go all the way.
Yeah, but there isn't much you can do. Like it's a small percentage against, I guess, huge. Not too many people are. Everybody has their own unique situation, isn't it? So, in France here, special needs. It's not like the UK. Sorry, here's a bit noisy, but they're getting there, but it's still very gradual. They're still far behind. They don't see it, especially with kids with autism. They see the kids as stubborn kids. So it's taking them a while to get used to the fact that they have problems. So I think it's in a severe case that they see a child as a child on the spectrum. But in the case where it's mild, even sometimes moderate, it's still very difficult. I think the first French psychologist I saw, she said, "I just see a stubborn kid." So
she said that as a psychologist.
Yes, she says, "Oh, he's a bit speech delayed. He's fine, and he only needs speech therapy, but just see a stubborn kid." So that's how they view it. So it will take them some time to get there, and then speaking to other people that are in the same situation, they see it as the same trouble that they're having. It's just a struggle. to, especially with the kids that fall in mild or maybe slightly moderate. But I'm guessing with time, they would, I guess they'll embrace it with time, but it's taking forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Sandra. I think, Pam, I think at this point, pretty much like you said, you answered some of the questions that she had. You probably have to, take the floor now and sort of work through the social services side of things. I mean, we know that kids that have additional needs, there's evidence to show that they are more at risk of social service referrals, domestic violence, parents that are not cooperating, parents that are frustrated, and also teachers that are frustrated. So they're quite known to the social services. So would you just shed some light for us today? I mean, Pam is a social worker with lots of experience. So tell us about the thriving child in the social services with additional needs, and obviously supporting what Sandra just shared with us today.
Okay.
Pam?
So, Sandra, I'm really sorry that you're having to go through that. I didn't realize that you were in France. So the information I was given was, UK, obviously how I would expect you to tackle that within the UK, but I'm really hoping and rooting that, you find the solution to the problem. So because of time, I have my presentation. I'm just going to try and share my slides, but I'm going to have to go through it really quickly. So Cynthia has sort of covered quite a bit of some of the things that I was going to talk about. So I'm not going to try and dwell too much on some of the points that she's already talked about. But the main thing that I wanted to discuss is accessing services for children, particularly the special educational needs and disabilities. And so what I'm hoping the session will cover is an understanding of what it is, what does SEND actually mean, the legislation that underpins the children that are recognized under SEND, and access to services and statutory provision, to explore the factors that impact. And I have particularly talked about, although this can generally affect all children, regardless of ethnic background, but I'm particularly deciding to dwell a little bit on Black and ethnic minority children and families, and sort of the barriers and things that, stop them from being able to access support. And then also the importance of advocating for the rights of your child, which I think Cynthia has covered beautifully with some of the things that she had to do for her son. So, so who is a child recognized under the term special educational needs and disability? So it's a legal definition, and it refers to children with learning problems or disabilities that make it harder for them to learn than most children in the same age. This would usually fall within the following categories, and Cynthia has touched on that. So developmental, cognitive, physical disability and illness, and behavioral. Now, some of you find that children within the physical disability and illness, they usually tend to get a lot of support because, it's a physical disability, it's seen, everybody you can see that clearly there's something wrong with the child. But where you actually find issues are around behavioral, cognitive, and developmental. And because they're not visible. And, as a parent, you have to fight extra hard to be able to say, look, there's something wrong with my child. I need my child to be assessed. Could you have, a closer look at some of the things that I've noticed? So I think it's really important as parents, carers, to understand what legislation covers the access to services for children within the special educational needs and disabilities. And although there are other legislations as well, but I find that the two legislations that actually pertain to access to services for children are the Children Act 1989, Section 17(1), and the Children and Families Act 2014, Part 3. Now, within the Children Act 1989, Section 17(1), it actually discusses the children how children that have disabilities and special needs, how they fall within, come to be known as children in need. And so it talks about the definition of a child in need under the Act. For the purposes of this part, a child is disabled if he is blind, deaf, or dumb, or suffers from mental disorder of any kind, or is substantially and permanently handicapped by illness, injury, or congenital deformity, or such other disability as may be prescribed. So basically, it just gives a very broad caption of what, how, or why a child will be seen as being in need within the Act, and that's covered, and that is covered within the section 17(1). So what are the statutory duties that are set out for local authorities within the Children Act 1989? So it is actually the responsibility of local authorities to identify children within their areas who actually require this support. It is the onus is actually on the local authority. But actually the reality is that families will still have to be the ones to contact local authorities to actually advocate and to fight for their children to have access to services. Also, local authorities have to maintain a register of disabled children, but I need to highlight as well that this is actually a voluntary register, and it's not a criteria for children to be able to access support or access services. So, you know, it's up to you if you decide that you want to put your child on the register. I feel that it is, there are a lot of positives if your child's on the register, because then it helps local authorities and informs the sort of services that they are able to provide if they have an idea of children who are actually, and what sort of disabilities the children within their areas have, and then that informs the sort of services that they put in place. But again, it's, you know, as I said, it's not compulsory. I should not be the criteria of whether your child should be assessed to be able to access services. Also, it provides services for disabled children, to provide services for disabled children, to minimize the impact of that disability on the family as a whole and on the child. So obviously providing that child with the best possible outcome. So that again is something that the local authorities need to be doing when they're doing their assessments. What sort of services will meet the needs of this child? What do we need to put in place to sort of support the family, to support the child, to help this child thrive, to help this child achieve the very best of themselves? And that's something that, you know, as part of the assessments, they need to be looking at. And then finally, provide for children living with their families with the following. So they need to provide advice, guidance and counseling, occupational, social, cultural, recreational activities. Home help may include laundry facilities, facilities for or assistance to travel to and from home to take advantage of services. Now, I am sort of going to cover something Cynthia talked about earlier in terms of migrants and access to some of these services. So I'll cover that later, but I just thought I'll just mention that. Okay. Okay, so particularly within the Children Act, there is the provision for short breaks and respite services. And this is actually going back to Cynthia's point about having your tribe. But actually, you find that it's not everybody who has family around. It's not everybody who has that support. So, and what do you do if you have a child who requires that, you know, you need a break? Even when, as a parent who doesn't have children with special needs, I need a break from my children a lot of the time. And when I get the opportunity, I take it. So then having worked with families, that's because my previous role was working within the Disabled Children's Service. And I saw firsthand the impact that disabilities has on families. It is not a pretty sight. You will walk into a family home and, you know, I've learned to be less judgmental. When you walk into a family home and you see the house is untidy, are you saying it's untidy because that is basically from your point of view? Or have you actually thought about the fact that this mom has been, because some children don't sleep. I worked with a child who only gets 2 hours of sleep. So he had ASD, ADHD, and his brain literally doesn't stop, and he makes the same sound throughout the day. And so you can imagine, parents don't get to sleep. The child, they have to stay up with the child because they have to try and keep him safe. Mom and dad have to take turns around him. I mean, when I go into that home, I'm not worried about whether the sofa is, you know, or if the child's bed is not made. For me, that's not what's important. Are the parents actually able to keep the child safe? And so when I'm doing my assessment, I need to be, you know, my assessment has to capture the things that are important. And, you know, as a social worker, you tend to find that there's some social workers who use their own, should I say, criteria, or what they feel is, you know, this is what this is. But actually, you need to think outside of the box, because there are other factors that are impacting on this child. A lot of children who have disabilities go on child protection plans, when actually, if you think about it, the factors that have put that child on that child protection plan is not because parents are not able to meet the needs of the child, is that they don't have the right support to do that. So we need to learn, when we're providing services, to think about how to meet the needs of the child, but also how to support families to meet the needs of the child. And I find that provision of short breaks and respite services is a brilliant way to do that. And so local authorities have the right to be, they need to actually provide that service if it is assessed that children who have certain types of disabilities and the impact that is having on the family, they need to be able to provide that respite support to stop a family from having a breakdown. So obviously it needs to be a local service and must be standard that meets and must be to a standard that meets and promotes the needs of the child. Provide good quality care in which parents have confidence. You know, the fact that, you know, it's a free service, you know, free per se, because local authorities providing service doesn't mean it has to be. It has to be of a good standard. Wherever you're sending your child to, you need to be happy that when your child is there, you're able to sleep at night. So that's very important. Also, it needs to be planned around the availability of the parent. You know, yes, as a parent who may have children with special needs or disability, you need to be around, because obviously anything can happen at any time. You need to be able to be called upon. But at the same time, when providing short breaks and respite services, parents need to be consulted. So you can't just say, well, this is all that we have. That's not good enough. You need to be able to say, these are the services that we have, provide a range of different services, make it child-centered, include the family into that assessment, ask them questions. They know the child better than anybody else. They're the ones that can give you the right information. We only get to see children, you know, okay, now because of the pandemic, we get to see children maybe once every 4 weeks, but initially within my team, we used to see children once every 3 months. And so, sorry, one sec. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Can I just pop? Okay, I'm in a meeting right now. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. There it is. Thank you.
That's the internet paper.
Yes, give it study. Thank you.
That's real life.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So this is why I say I need a break from them. There we go. And so where did I stop? So yeah, the service has to be planned alongside the family. So families need to be involved because they know the child better than anybody else. And services, again, that meets the needs of the child. But I highlighted 5 because, as I said, I do sort of want to dwell a little bit on why we struggle, I mean, within the community, within the Black and ethnic minority communities, to be able to access services. And so it's care which is compatible with the child's family background, culture, ethnic origin, religious persuasion, and language. And so, because sometimes you find that a lot of the services are one size fits all. And so why would I want to send my child somewhere that I'm not comfortable, that, you know, maybe they don't serve, if you're Muslim, they don't serve halal meat, or, you know, if you have certain religious requirements for your child, they don't observe those things. Why would you feel confident to be able to send your child there? So, you know, services need to take that into account when they're doing assessments for children. So going on to the Children and Family Act 2014, this was actually, this act was actually, legislation was actually came into force because it found that the Children Act didn't actually cover very much of what was required. There seemed to be a lot of gaps for children that had special needs, special educational needs and disabilities. And so this legislation was created to sort of bridge those gaps and to really highlight provision of services and working together within a lot of the services, because then what you tend to find is that health is doing what they need to do, education is doing what they need to do, local authorities are providing services, but actually you find that working together, because sometimes when you're providing different services and you're not working together, information is lost. And so it was really important that all these authorities need to come together to really provide a clear plan that meets the needs of the child across all aspects of their lives. And so that was the need. That was why this legislation was created. And so, you know, it's very clear. It's very child-centered, and it really outlines what is required from all services that work with children, what needs to be looked at, and that's what Part 3 of the Children and Family Act does. So the responsibilities that are set out within the Act is local authorities are responsible for all children and young people that have SEND in their areas. This has significant implications for the commissioning of services and for the assessment of individual children and young people. So again, this is local authorities setting out very clearly what is required of local authorities, what they need to be doing and how they need to be carrying out their assessments. How do they actually identify the children within their areas that need this support, and how can they put services in place to meet the needs of the child? Now, we talked a bit, Cynthia talked a bit about the HCP, and this is where it's actually outlined within the Children and Family Act. So an HCP is a legal document that outlines education, healthcare and social care needs of a child or young person from 0 up to the age of 25. The HCP should be built on an understanding of the aspirations of children, parents, and young people, and the outcome they want to achieve. The plans are reviewed annually by within educational settings, but require contributions from social care and health. So the HCP is actually a legal document that schools use when assessing the needs of their children within school. So within the HCP plan, you'll find that's where you have speech and language therapists, you have occupational therapists that come to school. So you have all of these other services. So for example, Sandra, if Sandra's son was in the UK, for example, and we find that this mainstream school is not meeting the needs of the child, when the HCP is actually drawn up, the specific needs of her son will be looked at. So for example, if I have a child I had a child who I worked with who didn't do very well within large settings, with social interaction was very, very difficult for him. And so he had one-to-one support, and there were certain times of the day that he couldn't cope. And so it's identifying what the triggers are and knowing, okay, you know, it's at this time, these are the things that would distract him. So they take him, you know, and it's funny that children, when they cling on to one person, it's that one person. They hate change. They hate you changing their structures. They can't cope with it. So it's doing everything possible to keep that structure in place for that child. Because if you disrupt that structure, they really cannot cope with it. So, you know, it's recognizing those things. And so those things are outlined and put in the HCP. And as I said, local authorities need to contribute. So they need to state specifically what support they're providing to that family, and also health as well. What support is health providing to that family? So that is all outlined within the HCP. Finally, health also have a responsibility, and some families will have access to something called continuing healthcare, and that's commissioned through the NHS commissioning group, clinical commissioning group. Now, this is very strict. Honestly, I hate working with the nurses and people that I've had to work with that provide that commission this support, because the checklist in itself is serious work. And as a social worker, you feel this child, you know, the support we're providing for this family is not enough. And I feel that the child would meet the criteria for the CCG, for the CHC, and you make the referral, and they turn around and say to you, well, sorry, we just feel that this does not meet our threshold. But actually, you can, as a social worker on behalf of your family, you can challenge that. And I've had to do that on a number of occasions, sometimes involving managers high up to actually fight for those families who we feel that the health needs of this child is actually impacting on the family, and they need to be getting that commission. And one of the arguments that the CCG usually have when they decline cases is that they feel that there are other services that are local, that are meeting the needs of that child. So for example, CAMS, you find that they'll say, oh, the child's open to CAMS, and CAMS is the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. You find that they'll say, oh, the child has, within the HCP, the child has speech and language therapist. Or you find, so they always find all these other excuses not to commission that service. And so you always find yourself having to challenge it. But actually, if you keep challenging and you know that, look, this child requires this support, eventually somebody will have to give in at some point. So again, it's about your resilience and wanting to push through. But like I said, it's not actually for everybody. So, you know, you just need to be quite forceful with it if you feel that the child meets that criteria. So factors that, just going on now to factors that I personally feel impact on accessing services, particularly for Black and ethnic minorities, are, so I found this is actually going back 1990, and I just thought, wow, actually still quite relevant today. Disabled children from Black and other minority ethnic communities face difficulties and challenges in accessing and receiving services, and often those they receive are not sensitive to their culture and language or relevant to their needs. They face the double discrimination of being disabled and being from a minority ethnic group. And actually, this was in 1990, but I've come to find that it's actually still very relevant even now. I worked within the Disabled Children's Service for about 1 year and 4 months. And in that time, I only worked with one Black child in that time. And surely, personally, I know that there are a number of Black and ethnic minority children who actually have those needs. And sometimes the only time that we come to be aware of them is if there's now become an issue within the family. So obviously, safeguarding issue is the first time that you actually get a sense that, oh, okay, this child is within the family and requires this support. And then, you know, we go on the back foot. So when the child should have had access from the beginning, they didn't get that access. So now we're working from a different perspective, where we start off from a child protection plan and sometimes work our way down, or sometimes the child has to be removed. So again, it is really about informing yourself about what services are available and how you can access those services. So these are some of the factors, again, that I've highlighted that I feel is a massive problem as to why services are not accessed. So there's usually a lack of confidence of services being culturally competent. I've already touched on that. There's structures, there's systemic structures and processes that are in place that, you know, that actually one size fits all. And I think, Cynthia, you said that really beautifully. One size fits all services, and children are different. I've got 2 girls, absolutely different. The one who's coming now and said, Mommy, can I have the internet paper? She will, there's nothing you can say. She wants it, she wants it. My other daughter, if I said to her, look, in fact, I think she's coming once and I've just done my hand, like, can you please leave? And she'll go immediately. So it just tells you that every child is different. And so you as a parent, you know, you need to understand your child's individual needs. And you're the voice of your child, and you need to take whatever action you think is necessary. And so one size fits all doesn't work. You need to be able to say, look, this is my child. I know what my child needs. This is what I feel that needs to be put in place. And these are the services I think would meet the needs of my child. But I think sometimes not generalizing, but I think sometimes either people are overwhelmed or people are just lazy or people don't have the time. But if you have this child who requires this support, you have to go over and beyond. Unfortunately, you have to do the homework. You need to find out what services are within that area. And again, Cynthia, you said that it's something that you did. You need to do the work because nobody's going to do it for you. Unfortunately, the local authority should be doing it, but it's you that would have to go back to them sometimes and say, look, these are the services that are within this area, and this is what I think my child needs. And you need to be, saying that quite strongly to them. I think another big problem is fear and perception of social services and the lack of understanding and information within certain groups and communities. When we hear, nobody wants a social worker involved in their life. There's a stigma attached to it. Somebody's knocking on your door and say, sorry, I'm a social worker. No, please. Because there's that negative perception about what social, as a social worker, the first thing people think is you're there to take their child away. But actually, no, social workers are actually there to support. Taking a child away is usually the last resort, because they have to prove cases that actually go to court. You have to prove that you've taken every reasonable step to work with that family before the child is taken away from the care of their parents or carers. So having a social worker involved, and actually not all children that have special educational needs and disabilities need to have social workers working with them. If you're able to actually access early help in time, they can put the right support in place, because aside from the child having a disability, there's no other concern. So there's no other reason why social workers or social services need to be involved. As long as the right support is already in place, the child is accessing the right services they need, then you don't need to have a social worker. But then sometimes there are other factors that will need social workers to be involved. And that may mean that maybe the emotional impact that is having on the family, maybe parents have mental health issues, maybe there's domestic violence. Yeah, so all those other factors may then require a social worker to remain in the life of the child. But generally, as long as the right services are in place and early help are able to provide that support, then you don't necessarily need to have a social worker working with you. And also negative past experiences directly and indirectly of services. I mean, sometimes it's a challenge, isn't it, when you're trying so hard to try and get support for anything, not even just for your disabled child, even for your family, for yourself, trying to get that support, because budgets are so tight right now, and local authorities are doing everything possible to give out the minimum that they can, if possible, because at the end of the day, they have to meet their budgets and all of that. So the little they can give is what they'll give. So again, it's about fighting. And so if you're not resilient, you don't have that. And I don't necessarily like to use the word resilient, because it's not fair. But then if you don't have that fighting spirit in you, at some point you just feel, what, I'm just going to try and do it on my own. But the reality is, it's not easy. How do you meet the needs of that child if you don't fight? And it's just a reality, but you have to do what you must, to ensure that your child gets the right support that they need. As I said, there's a stigma attached with disability within a lot of these communities. And there's a prejudicial attitudes and stereotypes from health, education, and social care professionals and service providers. And just going back to Sandra's point earlier, and this is what I was talking about. So generally, I had a child that, hold on a minute, please. Sorry, apologies. Right, so although that wasn't her experience in France, but it's actually quite prevalent here as well. There are people that have very negative perceptions about Black families. And so, as I talked about, invisible disabilities, where children are labeled as being naughty, being destructive. Meanwhile, they haven't actually thought about the fact that maybe there's an underlying issue that's impacting on this child, why this child is behaving in this way. And so you find that labeling. But then because they identify more with white children, and so it's easier for them to be able to see these issues very quickly because the child is white. And so they can make that referral very quickly. They have the information to share with the families. But then there's always that, negative mindsets, a negative perception about Black children, Black families. And so it's usually at crisis points that sometimes diagnoses are made. So, you know, it's important that, you know, even you need to be aware of some of these issues and how you can challenge them as well. And then you talked about no recourse to public funds as a migrant coming into the UK. And yes, there are a lot of supports that as a migrant family, you're not going to be able to access, like accessing child benefits and things like that. However, a child is a child recognized on that. A child who has a disability is still a child that requires support, and services need to be put in place to meet the needs of that child within the definition of Section 17 of the Children Act. So you need to be contacting your local authorities to find out what supports that can be put in place for your child. Now, as I said, it's based on individual support. Very quickly, I don't know if I've put this in any part of my bear with me, sorry, I'm really sorry about this.
Any questions or any comments, you can put just in the chat box. I have put a couple, so CY, you should see whether you can answer some of our questions as well, as well as Pam. Anyone who has any other questions, just pop in the comment box. Once Pam is done, we'll just go through the questions and we can then round up. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm back now. Oh,
we
right.
Understand mommy duties.
Honestly, okay. So but with regards to the no recourse to public funds, it's really important that you find out and identify what support your child will be eligible for. It's really important, and you know, you can't say because usually that is the information that is given. You're told that as a migrant, because you've had no recourse to public funds, therefore, you know, you're not eligible for anything. But then if your child's disability is impacting on your family as a whole, if services need to be or social services need to be involved because they are concerned about you not being able to meet the needs of your child, you know, then that support would need to be put in place anyway. So you need to make sure that you are able to access that support and find out what you're actually eligible for. Okay. I've talked about the advocating in the best interest of the child, children with special educational needs. So understanding the rights of your child under legislation and policy, information is key. Information is key to enable you to access the appropriate support for your children or for your child that's got special needs. You have the right to challenge the local authority and professional bodies, health and education involved in the care of your child. If you feel that the support that is being put in place for your child is not meeting your child's needs, you can challenge the local authority. With regards to, sometimes it can go as far as it needs to, and that's sometimes it gets to court, and I know families have actually gone all the way to court and they have won. It's the journey there that is difficult, but if you have the persistence, if you have the resilience to take it all the way, then I would say do that, because at the end of the day, that is your child and you're the voice of that child, so you need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that the needs of the child is met. It's okay to ask for help. It's absolutely okay. There's no shame in it. A lot of parents feel that it's a reflection on their parenting, that, you know, because I'm asking for help, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad dad, you know, we're not doing the best that we can. But unfortunately, this is something that's out of your hands. This child, you know, for example, as I was saying, a child who is only sleeping 2 hours a day, what can you actually do? As a parent, what can you do to stop the impact that is going to be having, or how that's going to affect your child? And if you're not sleeping, naturally, you can't be the best version of yourself for that child. So obviously, if the child needs to have that short break or respite care just to give you that break, then that's what you should be asking for. In fact, there's some children who their disabilities and special educational needs are so severe that they cannot actually stay in the home. I worked with a child who was physically, and not out, it was just reflexes. It's not like there was anything he could do about it, but he was always physically attacking his family, mom, dad, everybody. And so it got to a point where decision had to be made, where the child had to be put on, accommodated within section 20 under the Children Act, which is where you still maintain parental responsibility, but the local authority will be your local authority will be responsible to provide a different home where your child can actually stay, or residential support for your child, but you still maintain parental responsibility. So that is provided within section 20. So again, like I said, it's not a reflection on you. It's just that there are certain situations that are beyond your control. There's nothing that you can do about it. If you do not access services in a timely manner, your child may become known to services due to safeguarding concerns as defined under Section 47 of the Child Protection Act, of the Children Act 1989, where a child is deemed to be at significant risk of harm because you are struggling to meet the needs of your child. So these are the reasons why you need to, first of all, have the right information. You need to stop worrying and being scared that if social services are involved in your life is because they want to take your child away, because that's not the case. Yes, there are other factors that may need for your child to go on a child protection plan if they're real, genuine concerns, but everything needs to be done transparently. And so if you're able to, if you're the one that's actually approaching and asking for the help, asking for the support, and the child does not become known because there's concerns, then it is much better, because that way the assessment is done collaboratively, and it's not done in a way that is sort of putting you under a microscope. So that's very important as well. So just to conclude, disability is not always visible. If a child's behavior is difficult to manage, there may be underlying mental health issues that have not been diagnosed yet. Please ask for help. Services are there to support your child to thrive. It is not there to demonize or penalize you. If you don't have the right information, your child may be missing out on the support and services that they require to meet their needs. Do not be afraid to challenge authorities if you feel the services and support being provided does not meet the needs of your child. And then finally, let all support be child-centered led. In some cases, you're the voice of your child. In fact, in all cases, you're the voice of your child. You are the one that needs to say, this is what my child needs. And you need to be saying that with the loudest voice, the loudest microphone, because sometimes that's what you need to say, that's what you need to do to be heard. And then help them say what it is that they, that they want to say, because you know your child better than anybody else. And just on a final note, every child is a human being first. Their disability is not and should not define who they are. They have a right to be loved, cared for, just like everyone else. They need to be seen and heard. And finally, I've just put some relevant resources for anyone who wants more information on how to access services. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. That was a very wonderful session. So much knowledge there, so much information there from the social worker side of things. I asked a question. Anyone who has a question, please pop on the chat box. And Dr. Momoh just answered me. Because the question is, because I'm going to play devil's advocate now. So, it's one thing to be on the side of the parents, but it's also one thing to be side of the local authority. So let's say, for argument's sake, I'm head of the local authority in my area. And like you said, funding is tight. And if we are in CCG working there as GPs, like most of us do, there's limited resources available. But then we have a very anxious society, because I work in a place where every parent thinks their child has autism and ADHD. I have sat in an autism clinic right from house officer days back in Ghana, and I know what it is. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes literally you could see a stubborn child, or just a typical, literally not even a stubborn child, a normal child who's just active because they're very high on glucose, they love sugar, lots of milk, lots of sugar, and their parents just genuinely just projecting some anxieties on you, the doctor. So when teachers sometimes downplay these things, because sometimes if you ask the teacher says, oh, well, the child is just a bit active than normal. So how do you manage? It's a very difficult question I'm about to ask. How does the society manage to sort of know what is normal and what is not normal? Does that make sense? Because children on sugar rushes, whether you like it or not, they're very active, but they don't have ADHD, they're fine. So then there's anxiety playing from the parent side, and then there's teachers downplaying. So if we find ourselves as GPs in the middle, we're stuck in the middle. I know how many parents have called, they say, oh, I'm concerned my son has autism. Why? You haven't put him in a routine. You haven't tried to put him in a routine. You've just left him to play video games all night. His sleeping pattern is skewed. So now he doesn't want to sleep till 2 a.m. And then it projects on the teacher. Then it projects on the GP. And we're just in this serious pickle all the time, back forth, EHCP, non-EHCP. And sometimes if I'm working in local authority or TCG, it's quite, I mean, it is very difficult. I mean, so does anyone have any comments? Because what I tell parents is start with the simple things.
Yeah.
Why try putting him in the routine? Give him incentives for the video game if he's already spoiled, to say, okay, let's say he plays video games 2 a.m. Just tell him, okay, fine, we need to cut it down slowly. So let's do 10 p.m. and then let's do 9 p.m. Try and see whether those things will work. Work with the teachers and say, I have concerns. I haven't done my bit right. I haven't taken some responsibility in putting my child in a routine. And this is what it is. I mean, does anyone have any comments though? Because CY just commented and said, for parents who worry about their children having ADHD and autism, it's the best to listen to them and explore their concerns. Any impact on the child's life and family life, always ask what the thoughts of the teachers. Yeah, so the teachers make it a big difference.
Yeah.
They are still concerned. You ask, they refer for an assessment. Now that word concerned is very relative. I am playing devil's advocate, so everyone should forgive me, because I have patients calling all the time and their concerns. The phone fell, literally, they're concerned. So it's trying to work out how do you, because that's what everything is drowned in, plus the ones who have ADHD and autism, plus the ones who don't have, plus the ones who the parents are, so it's kind of a really big mix. So I don't know if anyone has anything to say, but that's what I experienced. And obviously, if I play devil's advocate, that's how the government sees it, like, oh God, everyone is concerned. So how do you decipher who is normal, who's not normal, who's really? It's hard.
I can relate to you, because there are genuinely, there are parents that have genuine concerns, because they've done everything that they can possibly do, and it's become apparent that it's not their parenting, it's something that's wrong. And so it is really, and I think that for a parent to get to that point where when like I said, some parents, like you said, some parents panic for Africa, but still that's besides the point. But I feel some of the questions that you've asked are important. Is exploring those things and asking them to do those things, right? So put the routine in place, stop some of the screen time. Yes, the child will have the meltdown. And then sometimes as a parent, you also need to be honest if you need help with parenting. And I think that that's very difficult for a lot of parents to come to terms with, because asking for help doesn't make you a bad parent. Even to children that do not have special educational needs, you might just need that extra support in yourself, because you're probably you're not in a very good place emotionally, mentally. And so, I remember there was a time where for me, my children would be TV, because I want to get on with it. Or I'll say, you know what, just go and take your iPad. Because for me in that moment in time, I just want my peace. I don't want fights. I just need me time. But the truth of the matter is, when that becomes normalized, and then all of a sudden you want to now take it away from the child, there's obviously going to be come on, why are you telling me now that I can't have screen time, or you're reducing my screen time to 2 hours when I used to have 6 hours? It's not possible. So you need to be able to balance that and say, look, or ask yourself the question, have I done everything that I can possibly do? And if you can honestly answer that question, and you just feel something is not right with this child, I need the child to be assessed. And like Cynthia said, you as unfortunately, whatever it is, you have to be listening and exploring that with the family and saying, okay, maybe there's something that we need to be looking at here.
Thanks, Pam. I'm just going to take you further. Basically, the other thing I'm saying that is because at the end of the day, like you said, the parenting skills, changing things, putting them in a routine. And yes, there are people that are anxious. There are people that will come back every day. The assessment process is not a one-day thing. It's not 1 week. It's not 1 month. if there is genuine concerns, they will stick with it.
Mm.
They will stick with it. And usually sometimes it doesn't go saying, oh yes, it's just, oh yes, they have ADHD or autism. When you're having the assessment, they will ask you to do some parenting class. I don't know if you've had experience with that, Pam, but that was my experience.
Yes.
You will get to do some parenting class, and you have to put in that effort. And I think the big thing for me when I'm talking to parents that have those concerns, one thing I always ask is, how is he doing in school? What's the impact on his education? What's the impact on his social communication? Is there bullying? Is there something else in the background? So you have to really go into it. But the thing is, unfortunately, if the parents are still concerned, we do still have to have the acts for the assessments, because you want to do, like with every parent, you want to do everything you can for your child to thrive.
Absolutely.
And again, like I said, it's not a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. I think it took me, what, 3 years to get the full assessment, because they will be checking for different things. And having the assessment does not necessarily mean that anything will change. Sometimes some parents just need to be able to understand there's a reason for why their child acts this way. When they understand that there's a reason for why their child is acting, then they are able to become better parents, because they are now able to say, okay, what else can I employ?
Yeah, absolutely. So special parenting skills have to be employed, like Dr. Yaba said. What else can you employ? Okay, thank you very much, CY. Thank you very much, Pam. Yabo just commented. She said that Dr. Yabo, she said, parenting skills have to be employed. I think most adults in society are also anxious for concerns that they can sit and tackle with working with their children. Of course, there are genuine cases that also need to be explored, and getting the right assessment and diagnosis is obviously very important. Yeah, it is, like you said, it is a balance of, it's trying to balance. And as a clinician, I'm sure a couple of us here as health workers, I think, like CY said, the most important thing I can do as a GP sometimes is listen. I just listen, and once they talk, I listen, I ask them about school, because I've had to learn it the hard way. When I first qualified, I was like, what's going on? Everyone's coming to me, their child has autism. And literally, that's what I experienced here. But now I'm used to it. I'm used to, oh, doctor, I think about, I'm like, have a seat, let's have a chat. So what are we doing? What are we not doing? Are we sleeping right? What's the teacher saying? What's the teacher not saying? What do you think? What can we do to help you to make it better? Then I tell you the process, and I tell you it's not a one-day thing. It's something we need to watch over time, and then put a couple of reports together. Oh, my teacher is not concerned. I say, have a chat with them, tell them you had a chat with me. Start documenting certain behaviors. As a parent, you can do that. Just document. Okay, like one day we went to the park and randomly the child had a meltdown. Nothing happened. So it's trying to work out. Yeah, so because sometimes when you go to the pediatrician, the community pediatrician for the assessment, they look at those. It's like a 20-page report. They look at instances that point out certain behaviors that are in keeping with these diagnoses. There is a form called the autism quotient form, and they tick it up, based on things you said and based on things they tick it up and they put a score to it. And then that score then tells us whether the patient is mild, moderate, or severe. But those scores are not just one thing you just tick from one day coming to see the GP for 10 minutes. It's something that has over the time happened. So I think the most important thing is for parents, I say, is we should educate ourselves as parents on these things. If you have people that are challenged, that borderline, they are worried, give them resources to read. Having things like this really helps, because people share experiences and people share about, what happens in the services, and just empower yourself as a parent. I mean, that's what I would say. That's the best way to approach it. Thanks everyone for attending. I think we are about 10 minutes late. No other questions in the comments section. Any verbal comments? Omo, do you have any comments? Yewande, Bimpe, Kenny, Bolanle, anyone has any comments?
It's just been a very eye-opening and very educational session. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so I think we'll just go now. I have to prepare for the party, which is next door.
Enjoy.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye there. Thank you, Pam.
Bye.
Thank you, CY. Just leave there.